Hey guys, it's Christian B here in Burnaby, a local Vancouver real estate agent. And for today's video, I'm going to call this one Rapid Fire Real Estate. I want to jump through 7 topics with you, and we're going to spend about a minute or two on each of these. Things that I find interesting in the news, something to look forward to in the future, and also a few tidbits on buying condos in stratas. And so the topics we're going to cover here is we're going to do a quick snapshot of the market. 1, we're going to touch on comparable sales. 3, would you live in a triplex unit or a fourplex? Because that is coming. 4 is the importance of strata plans when you're buying. 5, what about gyms and stratas and how they could affect your living situation? And we're going to touch on 6, where have all the penthouses gone? And 7, where have all the investors gone? All right, let's start with number 1. This is a snapshot of the market, and we had a very sleepy May. I've been surprised, and I've been wrong so far. I thought we would see a rebound in the market, and we have not seen that. May sales were down 20% over the last 10-year average for what we see in May. So very surprising, very slow, and it seems high-priced condos are the ones that are being hit the hardest. You know, I was doing a deep dive on the numbers, and for the downtown Vancouver Peninsula, so that's the West End all the way out to Vancouver East, Main Street, there were over 1.25 million. There are almost 500 listed condos. And do you know how many sold? 43. So we're a little bit under 9%. So a seller has about a 9% chance of selling a high-priced condo downtown right now. So that's really a buyer's market. Obviously, a tough situation for a seller to be in. You really have to price it right to get over the finish line there. The second thing, when we have a market like we have now, it does make things easier when it comes to using comparative sales data. And a colleague of mine made a great point. He said, we can now go back 6 months or 9 months and use sales from the same strata to to pinpoint market value for your unit. So it's really helpful because in a fast-moving market, 3 months is yesterday's news, yesterday's weather pattern, and you can't use sales data from 3 months ago. But right now, I'd say the sales numbers from today match up with what we had about a year ago. Topic 3, would you live in a fourplex? So the province has introduced Bill 44, and what that's going to do is they're taking over zoning from the municipalities. They're basically forcing the cities to build more homes. And so, that typical standard Vancouver lot we talk about, that 122 by 33, well, if the province gets their way on this, and they will allow owners and builders to build fourplexes. So I was doing some reading on this in the Vancouver Sun, and they quoted an expert in the field who said that this would cost builders about $1.6 to $2 million to pull off. So let's work backwards, and let's ask whether you would pay a certain amount of money to live in that nice, leafy, tree-lined neighborhood in East Vancouver, in Burnaby, or even in Coquitlam. So if it's going to cost a builder $1.6 to $2 million to build the structure, the fourplex, we also know it's going to cost about $2 million to buy the land. So 2 plus 2, that's $4 million. Now, I don't know if this expert was including property transfer taxes, holding costs. Builders still have to pay the mortgage for the year that they're building the product. Realtor fees, of course, we don't come cheap. So let's just use their numbers anyway. Let's say it's $4 million. Builders are going to want at least a 15% return. So they're going to want to make 4.5 to about $5 million. So the question is, if they're selling these triplex units for $1.2 million and they're estimating 1,000 square feet, question is, would you pay $1.2 million for 1,000 square feet, let's say off of Nanaimo and Kingsway, or, further east in Burnaby? It's probably going to be a 2-bedroom. You're not going to have parking covered. You're parking on the street. If you're lucky, you get maybe one covered parking spot. And again, what does this do for affordability? if you think about it, we know right away that the $1.2 million purchase, you need a $250,000 down payment just to get in the door. And that's a lot of money. Not a lot of people have a $250,000. And not a lot of parents have that much money to help their kids out with either. So I don't think this does anything for affordability. I think it's going to be interesting to see if the province tweaks this and allows for a larger fourplex. Let's say a 6,000 square foot fourplex, because now each unit could be 1,500 square feet. Now we're talking. Now it gets interesting, because a lot of buyers are just going to compare their options and ask, hey, what are the alternatives? I could spend $1.2 million plus GST. Remember, it's going to be new. So now you're paying $1.3 million. You're paying what else can you buy? You could easily get a very nice 2-bedroom downtown with parking in a very good building for $1.2 million right now. You could also get a very nice townhouse, 3 bedrooms, 2-car garage in Burke Mountain in Coquitlam. So I think buyers are going to compare. I don't know that if they don't increase the size of these units, I don't think it's going to make a difference. But let's see what the final bill says. Okay, let's jump to topic number 4. Strata Plans. Interestingly, just did a deal with an agent, very good guy, markets himself as a luxury marketing specialist. And, 4 days into the 5-day due diligence period, I asked him for a copy of the Strata Plan. He still hadn't provided it. And then he asked me, he said, why do you even need one? I thought, are you kidding me? You should know. So the key importance of a Strata Plan is you can find the official measurements of the condo you're buying or the townhouse on that Strata Plan. And it's often different from what's listed on the MLS listing. So you always want to know the measurements on the Strata Plan, because think about it. Imagine you're running your numbers off of the MLS listing and it's 50 square feet smaller on the Strata Plan. And you're saying, well, I'm paying $1,000 a square foot for square feet that aren't there. So you always get a copy of the Strata Plan when you are a buyer, especially for condos and for townhouses as well. Topic 5, gyms. If you're looking to buy into a condo tower, my advice to you is do not buy a unit that is straight below a gym. Because what happens is if you've got a weight room above and you got bodybuilders and they're dropping these weights and it's a thud and you hear the ring of the bells of the weights. So just be very careful, and you can cross-reference that with the Strata Plan. Check the Strata Plan to see if the gym is straight above your unit. It's not a good idea, in my opinion. Don't do it. And the only exception I'll make is if there are no weights in there. So if they've got cardio machines and it's a stretching room, a yoga room, fine. But I wouldn't. I would stay away from gyms that have heavyweight equipment. 6, penthouses. Where have all the penthouses gone? Have you noticed that a lot of the newer developments, that top floor now is carved into 6 or 8 units? I was just in one in West Coquitlam recently of a project. No penthouses. I just thought it was quite interesting. 10, 15 years ago, developments would have had a very nice penthouse. And nowadays they put a gym or an amenities room up there. And I think the reason for that is that penthouses are just too expensive. That luxury buyer is not in the marketplace right now. And I think a lot of the developers are approaching this from the standpoint, hey, let's just make this into 8 units and we'll sell them all at 1.3 or 1.4 rather than trying to sell one unit at $12 million. Makes sense from their perspective and probably from ours as well, doesn't it? Okay, and last, number 7, where have the investors gone? Now, I don't have specific numbers for this. I do have an anecdotal sense of this, and this is just talking to other realtors in our realtor community, but also other buyers of investment homes. They seem to be moving to the sidelines. And I think the big issue here is there have been a lot of regulatory changes. There's a lot of rules now making it very difficult on investors in terms of evicting tenants. It used to be you could move into the unit for 6 months. Now they changed it. It's got to be 12 months. And this was brought up to me by my wife, and she was talking to a friend of a friend of a friend, and it's they're folks from China, and they thought, well, we're renting this 2-bedroom out for $3,000 a month, and our payments, our costs on the property tax, on insurance are at $3,500 a month. So we're subsidizing this by $500 a month. Not fun if you're an investor. So what do? They thought, well, maybe we could move in for 6 months. Well, you can't do that anymore. You'd have to move in for 12 months, right? Otherwise, you can be fined a year's worth of tenant rent. So if that's $3,000 a month, that's $36,000 fine. So you have to be very careful as a landlord to do this the right way. But it just speaks to the fact that that a lot of investors are sort of forced into this subsidizing role where they have to subsidize it. They can't raise the rent beyond 1 or 2%. And, we saw that inflation ran much higher than that over the last several years. It's just the last quarter or two that inflation's starting to come back down. And investors have been handcuffed with how much they can increase the rent. And it's going to be interesting how many investors are going to be forced to sell, and because that may be a decision they reach. They may say, look, I don't want to be forced to subsidize a unit by $500, $600, $700 a month. And when they do that, that condo unit gets taken out of the rental pool and gets bought and occupied by an end user. And that's one less rental unit. And I think I'm still surprised that the province doesn't consider this. And I think for these reasons, we see a lot of investors moving to the sidelines and deciding they may not want to buy. And we've seen several developers in the last year pull the plug on projects, go bankrupt. And I think they're having trouble selling enough units. I've seen a lot of projects, for example, in the North Wally area in Surrey, where half the buyers are investors. And if you get too difficult with them, if you make it so that there's no incentive for them to invest, they're not going to buy. They're going to turn around and they're going to take their $100,000 and they're going to put it in a GIC. And before shooting this video, I checked what are the GIC rates. TD's offering you 4%. So you take that $100,000, you add $4,000. The GIC is not going to call you at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night and tell you the dishwasher's broken and leaking. It's not going to call you and tell you you got to replace the fridge. We had to do that on one occasion. The GIC is not going to call you and say, hey, I want to get a Rottweiler. I want a pet. And so a lot of issues that I think the province doesn't consider, the BC government doesn't consider when they tackle landlords who they think are being unfair to tenants. You got to think about it from both sides. And GICs are just one thing, but look at the stock market. I think it's returned year over year, 23% running back to July of last year, 2023. So, there's a lot of money to be made in other areas. It's not just in real estate. So we must make sure that the incentive remains for landlords, for real estate investors to stay in the market and keep buying units that they will rent out. Okay? All right. Those were 7 thoughts. Some rapid fire. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any comments or questions, leave them below. Feel free to do that, and I'd be happy to reach out to you. You have a great week and a great month.